Hi and welcome to this video on how to use the Reddit API in Python. So I'm going to keep this really short and we'll just get straight into the code in just a moment. But I just want to describe what we're actually going to cover in this video. So the first thing we need to do is obviously get access to the API. So I'll just take you through how we can do that. And then I'll explain how we authenticate ourselves when accessing the API. After that, I'll take you through some of the most common uses of the API that I think most of you are probably going to be most interested in. So that's stuff like getting the most popular threads from a subreddit or just a steady stream of all the threads being posted onto a subreddit. So let's just get straight into it and we'll start putting together our API. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is head over to this page here, which is reddit.com/prefs/apps. And then we just want to scroll down here and find this create another app or create an app button. And you click on there. And then you just give it a name. It doesn't really matter what you call it, just something that you recognize. We are using this as a script for personal use. Obviously, if you are using this API for something else, then tick one of the other options that is relevant. You can give it a quick description. And then here you need to give it a redirect URI. So for me, I'm just going to enter my Twitter address because basically you can put anything you want in here, but it's so that when people are wanting to find out something about your API, they will be directed to whatever you put in this box. So obviously, if someone wants to find out about my API, they'll come to here and they know that they can ask me about it. Okay, and then here, this is our secret key, which we are going to need later. So make sure you keep a note of this and also this personal use script as well. So I'm just going to copy those across and put them into my Jupyter lab here. And I'm just going to call it client ID. So I'll identify, and this is the public key. And here we have our secret key as well. So this one you need to keep secret. Obviously I'm showing you this, but this API won't exist by the time I upload the video. And we just enter those. So now we have those. The next step is to request a temporary auth token from Reddit. And the first thing we need to do is actually import the request library. Then we get our authorization like so. And here we enter our client ID and secret key. Now, once we've done that, we are going to need to actually log in. So to do that, we can first initialize a dictionary where we specify that we are going to be logging in with a password, which we do like this. And then we pass in our username and password as well. And for my password, I'm just going to read it in from this text file here. You can, if you want, and this is just a simple script, you can just enter your password here. It's not recommended, it's recommended that you read it from elsewhere, but it's completely up to you how you deal with this. But this is how you can read it in from a text file. and just make sure you put R there instead of W for read. Okay, so that is the dictionary that we will need to pass along to Reddit in just a moment. So we also need to essentially identify the version of our API. And for this, you can literally put anything you want, but we'll put something that is at least slightly descriptive. We'll just call it my API. And put this is the version number. Now, all we need to do is actually send a request for our OAuth token. And we send this request to this address. We are accessing the API, version 1, and the access token endpoint. And in there, we also need to include our auth that we received earlier. We need to include our login data. And we also need to include the headers. And this will return us, hopefully, everything that we need. Okay, and then here we can see our access token. So we need to access that, and we'll just store it in another variable here. So this token is something that we will need to add to our headers whenever we're using the API. So to do that, we just write this. And we need to add that within authorization. And the token itself needs to be formatted in a string that contains the word bearer, space, and then the token itself. So then if we just print out headers, this is what we get. So now we can access every endpoint within the Reddit API. So beforehand, if we had tried to access this endpoint, the OAuth reddit.com, then API v1 me. If we'd have tried to access this, we would have not been allowed. So let's say we just put the headers, and we will just put this user agent API that we had before. Okay, and we get a 401 response. So let's copy this and try again, but this time use headers, which includes our authorization bearer token. And we see we get a 200, which means everything is okay. And then we can add JSON onto the end here, and we get all of this information. So that's great. We now have access to anything, and we can start accessing what I think is probably the more relevant, important information. So the first one of those I want to focus on is retrieving the most popular posts on a subreddit. So if I head over to the Reddit API documentation over here, okay, so we can see here we have this get subreddit hot, and this returns all of the hot posts on that subreddit. So in our case, let's go with the hot threads in the Python subreddit. So to do that, we send a get request, and like we can see here, it's this r subreddit hot. So we can copy that across, and we start the request with the OAuth reddit.com, and then we have our r subreddit, get rid of this end bracket, hot. And of course, the subreddit that we want to look at is Python. And then we can just add our headers in here. So this is request, not Reddit. And then we can see what is in there using this JSON method. And then here we get all this data. So this is obviously not very clean at the moment. So let's clean this up and we can put it into a pandas data frame so it's a bit more readable. So first, let's figure out how to access each post within the response. So let's open this again. Now, within this JSON, all of our posts are contained within this data key here. So let's add data. And then once we get into data, we have a few different options. So we have this mod hash, which is nothing we need to care about. We have dist, which is just 27. That's not the post that we want. And then we have this one here, which is children. And then you'll see that this is a list. And within this list, we have all the information about all of the hot posts within the Python subreddit. So that is where we want to extract data from. So let's do that. Let's print that post. Okay, and now we are getting somewhere. And you can see that there's quite a lot of data in each one of these. So it's probably worth us cleaning this up a little bit more. So you can see here, this is our other, the next entry in this list. So what we probably want to do here is extract the data within the post. So this is giving us this other dictionary, which contains all the relevant information we want. And then it is within here that we are going to want to extract the different parts of information into our data frame. So just as an example, we have the title. Okay, and then here we can see all of these titles of the most popular threads in the subreddit. So this is essentially the syntax that we're going to use to populate our data frame. So first, let's just import pandas. And maybe install it. Okay. And then we need to initialize our pandas data frame. So we do it like so. Okay, and that just gives us an empty data frame. And then we're going to use the for loop, like we did before, to loop through each one of the posts and just extract them as a row into this data frame. So we'll do df equals append. And then within this, we create a dictionary, which is going to contain everything that we would like to include. And at the end of that as well, we also need to remember to ignore index. Otherwise, we'll end up with a load of errors, and we want to avoid doing that. So first, let's include the subreddit, just so we know where this data is actually coming from. So just like before, we want to do the post data, and then we just access the subreddit. Okay, and let's just have a look at what we have there. So, okay, perfect. As expected, we're getting all of these entries through. So that's great, but obviously we're probably going to want a little bit more than just the subreddit. So let's just add a few more items as well. So we have the title, like we did before. And another pretty important one, in my opinion. So let's just go this. Another important one is the self-text, which contains the actual content of the thread, or the text content of that thread. So that one is pretty important if you're wanting to extract any information about, well, anything from Reddit. Okay, so this is starting to look a little bit better. Let's see what we have. Okay, it looks good. And maybe we want to also include a few other items, maybe the number of upvotes, the downvotes, and the score of the post. So we can do a few different things here. We have the upvote ratio, which is of course the number of upvotes it is getting in comparison to downvotes. And maybe we'd also just like to include the actual number of upvotes and downvotes as well. And again, it's pretty straightforward. We just include these. And we can include downs like so. And finally, we can also include the score of the post. Okay, so that gives us quite a lot of information that we can sort of go ahead with this. Now, if there are other things that you're interested in adding in here, you can just do this to actually see what keys you can include. So just access the data and then keys, and this will just return a list of everything in there. Now, this is pretty useful for actually finding the most relevant or the most popular posts, but a lot of the time, what you might want to do is actually stream the newest post. So you essentially get a real-time update of what is actually going on. And I would say this is probably what most people are going to want to use the API for. So we can take a quick look at that as well. And we can find it just over here. We have this r subreddit new. Okay, so essentially all we actually need to do here is adjust our old call to, instead of reaching out to the hot endpoint, we reach out to the new endpoint. So let's just modify our code to do that. Okay, so up here where we have hot, we just change that to new. Okay, seems to have worked. And then we just do the same thing again. So we just rerun this code. Okay, great. And then we do this. And we get all of the latest posts on our subreddit, which of course is pretty useful. Now, this is returning around 27 to this one is 25 posts at once. And of course, you're probably going to want maybe a few more than that. So what we can do is actually add a limit parameter. And this limit parameter, we just add like so, add params, and then in here we add limit, and we can go up to 100 items. So if we run that, and let's just take a look at what we had before. We had this JSON and we had this dist equals 25, which means that we returned 25 items before. Now if we run that, we will see 100. So now we're returning 100 items. And of course, that's pretty useful. So now we're getting more data back. And we can essentially just keep running this again and again and extracting as much data as we would like. So if we just rerun this, so you can see we go up to 24 here, rerun that, and we will go over to 99. Okay, so that again is pretty useful. Now, there's also one more thing that is pretty important to understand with this, and that is how we can extract the IDs of a post from the Reddit API. So if we go into post here, we have these two different items. We have kind, which is actually, I think, up here. So we have this T3. So Reddit posts just have these different types or kinds, and it's essentially a code that says whether it's a thread or some other type of post, which I think is something like ads or videos or something along those lines. But generally, we're always going to be working with T3, which are threads. But if you are working with something else, of course, that may change. And then, as well as that, we also have the ID, which is here. And we can put both of these together in order to create the Reddit post ID. So we add this with a underscore in the middle. And that is the unique ID, and that is unique for every post on the subreddit. And in the API documentation, you will see this referred to as the full name. So what we can do with this is actually essentially loop back in time with the API. So one of the things we can do is only request threads that are further back in time than a post given a specific full name, which it would be this T3 mix of letters. So if we would like to do that, so let's take this final one we have here, and all we do is add that into another variable after, like this. And this will only take 100 new threads that have appeared after this post. So we can do that. And then what we can do, rather than actually initializing our new data frame, we can avoid doing that, and we can actually loop through and add all of these new posts to our data frame. And then we end up with even more data. And here we go. Okay, so that's how we can walk through and keep extracting more and more data from the Reddit API. Now, at some point, it will stop allowing you to do this. You can only go so far back in time, which depends on the volume of requests that you're making, the volume of threads on a specific subreddit. But that is essentially all you need to actually do that. So, like I said at the start, the Reddit API is incredibly powerful, and unlike most other APIs on social networks, it's free to use. So definitely something to take advantage of and see how you can implement it in your own projects. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.